warm welcome to those of you who are with me in the room this evening and to those who are watching tonight's event online. This is the 35th Edinburgh Medal Ceremony for 2021 and of course being held here in the centre of Civic Edinburgh in the City Chambers. Now, since last year when Sunita Narine accepted her medal in New Delhi, remarkable progress has been made here in Scotland with the success of our vaccination programme, enabling some of us the pleasure of the physical event this evening, alongside hopefully the very many people who are attending via the internet. Now, it's possible to be seduced by the apparent power of the technology that we're experiencing this evening. But before the internet, there were telephones, and before that, radio. Before that, the telegraph, not that I remember, the telegraph has to be said, and before that, the universal postal system. But before that, we used to talk to each other, to exchange information, ideas and opinion. Now, what our technology has done for us is to speed up that process of talk, but still at the heart of everything that goes on is that ability and need to talk. And that's at a point which is particularly appropriate both for our festival and for the work of tonight's medalist. But the technological connection has not been mirrored by wider social progress. If our situation in Scotland is improving, that is not true for the world as a whole, where the pandemic continues to spread. Tragically, there are more people dead this year so far than in the whole of last year, and with more new transmittable variants continuing to evolve. Alongside the international COVID crisis, our global population are also facing the more profound impacts of the climate crisis and the destruction of biodiversity, perhaps best illustrated with the current news coming from the west coast of America and Canada, where we're seeing some extreme climate conditions. Now, both of these are the subject of critically important conferences later this year. We have the Climate Conference in Glasgow at COP26 and the Biodiversity Conference in Kuming City at COP15, where hopefully the Edinburgh Declaration will be adopted by the United Nations. It's fair to say that although scientists have described these crises as what needs to be done if we are to survive, it has been the broad action of civil society that's brought us to the position that potentially serious practical efforts may finally be taken jointly to deal with these issues. Our Science Festival, as the mother of all science festivals, is part of that global movement, for without the discussion and debate between all the members of society, scientific and lay, we would not have reached where we presently are. But we need now to see and see delivered practical, urgent action across the world. We can and must all play our part in that. Now, this year's medalist has demonstrated in her work the combination of science and social practice necessary to have a direct, beneficial impact upon our world. In that work, she and her colleagues demonstrate that international cooperation and delivery can be achieved for a better world for us all. I would now like to call upon Professor Linda Bauld, OBE, to deliver the oration. Linda.
Thank you very much, Lord Provost, and I'm really delighted to be here, particularly with Professor Larson receiving this prestigious award. You will know that my colleague, Professor Devi Sridhar, had hoped to be with us as well today and hasn't been able to do so. So I'm just going to say a few words on behalf of both of us this evening. So Heidi's work in combating misinformation and reducing vaccine hesitancy has always been important, but never as much as now, as vaccines are one of the best routes out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has thrown all our lives upside down since last March. When thinking of Heidi's work, I was reminded of the quote, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes." And investigating this, it actually is the case that it's often attributed to Mark Twain, that quote, but it may have originated from the Irish writer Jonathan Swift nearly a century before Mark Twain's birth. Nonetheless, no matter who said it and when it was first said, the content is still as relevant today as it was centuries ago. Heidi is a professor of anthropology, risk and decision science at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and clinical professor, Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. Her research focuses on the social and political factors that can affect the uptake of health interventions and also, importantly, influence policies. Now, as you'll all know, a public health intervention is defined as any effort or policy that attempts to improve physical and also mental health potentially at the population level. We would all think it would be hard to argue with that, but as we have seen over the past 18 months, people have often disagreed or protested against such interventions. And the latest example of that is vaccine hesitancy, with many people shunning or spreading misinformation about vaccines globally, despite robust clinical trials which have been pored over meticulously by regulators worldwide before making any approval decisions. And this is why the Vaccine Confidence Project, of which Heidi has been the director since 2010, is of such vital importance. The Confidence Project helps the truth get its shoes on and start running much quicker than before. A research team with a broad range of expertise, anthropology, digital analytics, epidemiology, policy, psychology, and they all carefully monitor public confidence in vaccination programs. And through an information surveillance system that can detect early any concerns around vaccines and evaluating the risk level of public concerns by the analysis of news, social media, and community conversations worldwide. So they can really assess any potential disruption to vaccine programs. And when they identify a risk, it's possible to provide guidance and engagement with the public to ensure trust in vaccines and immunization programs are not undermined. And based on their experience and insight, Professor Larson and her team had advised governments, pharmaceutical companies, social media companies, and humanitarian organizations in how to tackle misinformation that can feed into hesitancy. But the Vaccine Confidence Project, of course, is not the only time that Professor Larson has worked with humanitarian organizations. In fact, that's where her career started, with Save the Children, and this was followed with work with UNICEF and also Save the Children in Nepal in particular. And in her work, I understand she's always strived to appreciate what people have to say and the differences they might have with each other, with technology, or at the moment, immunization programs. And she's found, importantly, that listening to people and asking them about their concerns, and listening perhaps to the rumors that have been spread, and responding to those concerns, brings about a more positive result than telling people what you think they need to hear. This insight has been instrumental in the work that Heidi has done in supporting vaccination programs in Sierra Leone, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda. And in my own work, and also in Devi's in the Usher Institute at the University of Edinburgh, we know that it's really important to understand local needs, whether it's here in Edinburgh, across the UK, or the work that she and I do in global health. And we've often referred to Heidi's research when doing our own. In a recent article in The Lancet, Heidi said that her father would often say, "Don't believe everything you read, question it." And I think that's good advice for everyone, especially researchers. But as researchers, I feel we also have a responsibility to provide answers when people do question us. So this is something Heidi's done time and time again through her work, and in doing so, I'm sure she has helped save many lives, because what we are seeing through this current wave of the pandemic is that vaccines are preventing a huge numbers of death. So we find, both Devi and I, great inspiration from Heidi and her work, and I hope that many others do, especially women, as we need to really make sure that we support more women to make this contribution across a wide range of disciplines as we move forward through this pandemic and look ahead. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Professor Larson, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's my honour now to present Professor Heidi Larson with the Edinburgh Medal, and I will do so by beginning by reading the citation, of which there is a hard copy on the table in front of Professor Larson. The Edinburgh Medal has been instituted by the City of Edinburgh Council to honour women and men of science and technology who have made a significant contribution to the understanding and well-being of humanity. The Edinburgh Medal for 2021 is awarded to Heidi Larson in recognition of the role that she has played in recognising the importance of popular and widespread views and misunderstandings of vaccines, approaching it with empathy and understanding, not condemnation, developing programmes and an international organisation and networks to practically engage with communities to advance public health and social well-being for the benefit of all. Many congratulations, Heidi. I'm delighted to present, socially distanced, the 2021 Edinburgh Medal, which is here on the cushion in front of us. So I'll let you take that, Heidi. Excellent. And I'll now invite you to deliver your medal address.
Thank you very much. It's a true honor to be here and receive the 2021 Edinburgh Medal. Thanks to the Lord Provost, to Professor Ian Wall, who I've had extensive communication with, and to all those who work so hard to navigate all the challenges of COVID to organize this year's Edinburgh Science Festival, which is on the really important topic of One World. It has been a challenging year for all of us, well, more than 1 year, but this past year, with COVID touching every life on the planet in one way or another, and its impacts are far from over. It's testimony to the connectedness of our one world, while at the same time it has exposed deep fractures, inequities, and polarization of politics and sentiments. The theme of my work for the last 20 years, which you've already heard about, so I won't talk too much about that, has been to unearth the drivers of what appeared to me 20 years ago as a growing trend, then more slowly amplified since then, of polarization between the scientific community and publics, particularly as it was playing out around vaccines. And we have since seen it in many other domains. But that was particularly visible and has become kind of a touch point to unearth a lot of other issues. The task I set out was not just an academic interest, but a deep concern of the resulting health decisions and their consequences, vaccine refusals in particular, because they were starting to allow some of these once eliminated preventable diseases to reemerge in big and small ways. This was about human lives. In the Vaccine Confidence Project, as you heard, we bring together a mix of different disciplines from psychology to politics and political science, decision science, and computing science, and mathematical modeling. I have to say, I founded this 11 years ago, but we've grown also with the evolving technology environment. When I first started in the work, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter 20 years ago. And this was already emerging as an issue. We forget that Facebook was 2006, then followed by Twitter. For those growing up now, they only know that environment, but it has dramatically changed the landscape around science. Drawing from the last decade of this work, decade plus, I recently published a book called Stuck: How Vaccine Rumors Start and Why They Don't Go Away. I just want to read an anecdote from Stuck, because it was a situation I was in that I felt really captured the state we're in in our dynamic and tensions between science and society. It was winter in India. I was sitting in a holy cow and Krishna-adorned taxi in New Delhi, driving to meet colleagues at the Ministry of Health. We were stuck in traffic, with a cacophony of impatient horns surrounding us. The polluted smog was so thick, the idea of taking a deep breath was not a good idea. I looked out the window. It was a movie in itself, but I found a moment of wisdom, frustrated by the traffic, concerned that I was going to be late. And I stopped and I looked up, and there was a half-bent sign on the side of the road in large painted red letters on a once white background. And it said, a true Indian wisdom, "You are not stuck in traffic. You are traffic." And in that moment, that mantra has stayed with me ever since. It has helped me navigate and understand the situations we find ourselves in, as individuals and as societies, not surrounded but creators of our stuckness. The difference in perspective, in language, and in experience that define the tensions between science and society, between those observing the traffic, counting the cars, studying the patterns, and informing the rules, and those caught in the traffic, frustrated, caught in the herd, feeling voiceless, is an allegory of the dynamics which are driving global networks of vaccine dissent. One of the ways I've seen that publics try to navigate the abyss between this increasingly elite scientific language and bureaucracies and their lay concerns and experiences is rumors. I love rumors. They tell stories, they're unearthing all kinds of experiences, emotions, values, histories. And I've really made that a focus of my work because it does tell a story. I often give a talk on risk and rumor in global health and start by saying, rumors have a bad reputation. They're not all bad. In science, actually, we use rumors a lot. We use them to hear important signals of disease outbreaks. We listen to them to see maybe there's something new there, safety signals. If there's a problem with a vaccine, we want to know, we need to know. Rumors also serve as a means of collective problem solving, sharing evolving pieces of information that aren't not yet verified, and trying to make sense of them, particularly in times of uncertainty, which is one of the reasons in the context of the current COVID pandemic that there's a huge outbreaks of rumors, because people are trying to make sense of something that just doesn't always make sense. And that's also true in the scientific community. Things are changing every day. We're learning things every day. Rumors thrive in situations of uncertainty, whether around a new vaccine, unfamiliar disease outbreak, or more catastrophic events like wars, natural disasters, or pandemics. They're all fertile ground for rumoring. Rumors can also carry, as I mentioned, important pieces of information. Managing the fine line between intentionally harmful rumors and uncertain yet potentially invaluable ones is particularly challenging. Rumors have been studied by a range of researchers. I look in my book about some of the history of rumor studies. Psychology of rumors is a huge area, a discipline that's really looked into rumors, both from the sides of personalities of people who are rumor spreaders and rumor keepers, and those who characterize society by the nature of the rumor, wedge-driving, fear-provoking, wishful thinking rumors. The whole science of rumors had a particularly big explosion of articles in Nature and others by mathematical modelers on rumors and also in psychology around the World War, the First and Second World War, which are, again, we didn't have the connection we did, and people wanted to know where were their sons, brothers, fathers. Were they okay? Were they not? Will we ever know? In the context of the current misinformation environment, or COVID-driven infodemic, as been coined by the World Health Organization, my research is particularly on understanding the fertile ground, as some of the mathematical modelers talked about it in some of their early work, the vulnerability factor, the ones who are prone to infection. Because you can look at a virus model in the same way as you look at rumors. You need an agent, you need the fertile ground, you need the dynamics. You can bring some of the same dynamic systems thinking to rumors. But my concern is that, and we've been in our research group particularly looking at what we call the Misinformation Susceptibility Index that we're developing. Because I think that there's been a disproportionate focus on fact-checking and debunking pieces of misinformation, clipping the head off of weeds that will just flourish instead of getting rid of the root causes of the dissent, the drivers. Trying to delete or correct a rumor without considering the reasons behind it is missing the point. And Missing the Point was actually the working title for my book until I was told by Oxford University Press that actually one word is going to be much better. So we found one. But I think the underlying theme of missing the point resonates. Pushing rumors underground may temporarily suppress, if not aggravate, those who have strong beliefs. For those trying to make sense of uncertainty through a rumoring process, feeling censored or suppressed can actually further alienate them and instill even more distrust in information sources and official sources. I think about this a lot when I see governments wagging their finger at Silicon Valley and saying, shut it down, Facebook, shut it down, YouTube, fix this problem. Well, if only it were that easy. I spent a lot of time engaging with, in conversations with, sitting with different teams at Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and others to try to think through this. It is not that easy. There is no switch you can flick to turn this off. And even if you could, it would go somewhere else. And that makes it even more complicated. We've already seen in some of the measures that are being taken in Silicon Valley with the tech companies, we're seeing the conversations, the anxieties, the dissent move. We see them go underground, which makes it much harder for us to understand what is going on. It's not necessarily a productive way to do it. We've seen since the beginning of the Vaccine Confidence Project, we used to follow online news information because that was the most ubiquitous thing to look at. And we saw all kinds of perspectives on vaccines in the news. And slowly, slowly it disappeared from news. Right now, in our news, we continued our online news monitoring. Most of the vaccine issues, except more recently in COVID, it's back a bit, but they've all landed in the business pages. The real sentiment, the real emotion has moved to social media. So the calls on social media platforms to clean up the misinformation is just not an option. They can and are helping to redirect search queries to credible information sources, helping to amplify some of the important credible information, but the landscape is much more complex. And I've heard people come to me, concerned people, and say, you know, they're sending us to WHO, NHS, CDC. We've been there. They didn't have what we needed. It didn't give us the answer to our questions. It's okay for the first-time searchers. Much of the circulating information is also instilling doubt. The strategies of people who are questioning, some purposefully and some genuinely, is asking questions, and they're not overtly spreading mistruths. So it's not so straightforward. And we cannot delete doubt. Doubt is the soul of science. Doubt and questioning. And who are we to be repressing the doubts and questionings of others when that's what keeps us driven as scientists? Many of the vaccine narratives are also, both pro and con, highly embedded in websites and conversations that are, and social networks that are about other things, a lot of other things. And that's been even more in the context of COVID. It's in from your taxi driver to your whoever, shopkeeper, your Deliveroo, everybody is talking about vaccines. Should I or shouldn't I? What do you think? Did you get your jab? But there's another type of misinformation that's really struck me, and this was in exchange with, I was on a panel with someone whose work I've followed since then, 18 years old. He was 16 when he started thinking about this. This is someone named Ethan Lindenberger. He lives in the US. He was 16, 17. His mother was fiercely anti-vaccine. But when he was 18, he said, I can get a driver's license, I can vote, I can decide to get a vaccine. My mother won't go near it, but I know better. And he went on to Reddit, and he just asked, really genuinely, listen, I decided I want a vaccine, where do I go to get one? He was flooded with all kinds of information. A lot of peers saying, oh, can we do this? Where can we find it? And it became a bit of a sensation, and he's been hugely attacked by some of the anti-side. But I was on a panel with him in Brussels at an EU summit on vaccine actually it was a global summit hosted by the EU on vaccines. And he got up there and he said, you know, there's misinformation and there's misinformation, but there's one piece of misinformation I'm really worried about, and I echo his concern. And he said that piece of misinformation is that those who have misinformation or seem to be spreading it are not bad people. They have one piece of their thinking that believes something, but you can't shut them down. Speaking of the cancel culture in a sense. He said, my mother is a loving mother. And he turned to this whole forum of very senior officials from all kinds of countries and said, she did not give me a vaccine for the same reason that you're all here. She wanted the best for my health. So when you put it in that perspective, when you see where people are coming from, that there's something else going on, some other emotions driving, clipping that piece of misinformation is not going to deal with the issue. This is about much deeper emotions. I've spent more and more of my time in the last, particularly couple of years, talking to neurologists, and neurobiologists also, trying to understand this emotion-reason dynamic. And the whole field of neuroscience is seeing more and more how intricately involved reason and emotion are, and that the clusters in our brain, and I'm not going to start to go there in any detail because it's not my field, but they work collectively. Someone said it's kind of like your research group. They're always doing multiple functions. There's not one side of your brain that does emotions and one side that does reason. As one of my colleagues, a neurobiologist, she said, emotions don't exist to make us think. They exist to keep us alive. One of my favorite books that I've been reading in this field, and I've gotten to know the author, is called, by Lisa Barrett, called How Emotions Are Made. And she really helped me understand emotions. They're very much like immune systems. We all have different emotions in this room. We all have different psychological frames that make us more or less vulnerable to misinformation. Every event, every experience you have from childhood shapes your emotions in the same way your immune system, with each exposure, can frame and build your immune system. I want to come back and end with thinking about the relationship between technology and society. Because one of the things that I think we have underestimated is that some of the rumors that are going on, from the chip anxiety that Bill Gates is putting a chip in your arm, to being counted and surveillance and anxieties, is a deep fear of what has been a very recent and huge digital technology transformation. And I think that one quote that really has stayed with me when I've tried to think about this a lot, and how do we deal with that, which is a much deeper issue than the way it plays out, is Martin Luther King, when he got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. This is 1964. This is way before the current technology challenges we have. Modern man has brought this whole world to an awe-inspiring threshold of the future. He's reached new and astonishing, I would add, he and she, have reached new and astonishing peaks of scientific success. He has produced machines that think and instruments that peer into unfathomable ranges of space. It's a dazzling picture of modern man's scientific and technological progress. Yet, in spite of these spectacular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, he says, something basic is missing. There's a sort of poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance. We have to learn we have learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned the simple art of living together. I think this is one of the most poignant statements in the context of COVID. We've had the most spectacular scientific success around COVID vaccines. Unthinkable, in fact. Not just one vaccine, but multiple vaccines. 40 years of AIDS and we're still not having a vaccine. And it's been incredible, the characterization of viruses, the scientific success, and look at the state of the world in terms of its not the simple act of living together, issues of inequity, how somehow this has created more polarization, more division, more inequities. Something's wrong. We need to turn this opportunity around. When I started to write this acceptance talk tonight, I thought of the title, Put Your Guns Down, People Are Scared. Because we attack in reaction to people say, I don't want that vaccine. Why are you being so stupid? Why are you being so ignorant? What's going on there? So put your gun down. Somebody's scared. Somebody's nervous. They're anxious. They don't know what to do. They may not come back for the next consultation. I had one woman contact me once. She's one of the members of a group of chapters around the UK that are more nature prone. Their values of life, from natural food to home births to a whole range of things, and a lot of them are not fans of vaccines. But I had been on a BBC panel one morning, and I was leaving the studio, and I got an email, I guess they're on our school website, saying, thank you. I'm just emailing you to thank you, because I'm always nervous somebody's going to say, why did you say that? Well, I'm not always nervous, but I do get a lot of that. She said, thank you for not blaming parents. And I thought, wow. And she said, we're always being blamed for all the immunization problems in this country. They always blame it on us. Thank you for not blaming us. And then I said, well, I thanked her for her email, and I said, I'm sorry you feel that, but thank you. And she asked if she could come meet me in my office to talk to me about some concerns. So, since I'm constantly preaching about listening, it's hard to not say, you're welcome to come to my office. She came, She had a dossier, a file of clippings, testimonies. And she said, I just want to tell you that, you know, in my group of peers, not all of their values line up with yours and your colleagues. But there are a number of them actually that I think you could get vaccinated. But you know, I want to show you here this dossier that we've put together. I've put together, she said. It's testimonies of people's interactions with some of their health interactions. It's newspaper clippings of the way they're referred to. She said, you should tell your peers that if they just talk nicely, maybe they'll get more people to vaccinate. And I just sat in my chair and I said, you know, here's someone who is coming from a community that doesn't even really believe in vaccines. And she's coming to try to say, hey, if you just tell your peers to talk more nicely, you're going to get more people on board. And I felt very moved that she felt courageous enough, because it was a big move for her to come to my office. But I was also disturbed that it would come to a point where people would feel like they kind of had to go through somebody else because they weren't going to be listened to. So I'm going to just end here with a couple lines from the book that tries to pull it together a little bit. We're in a situation with a Babylonian mix of truths, partial truths, and intentional lies that has taken a toll on public trust in science. And even the very need for vaccines is being questioned. There's been an overall tectonic shift away from trusting experts to having more confidence in the opinions and evidence shared in stories circulating among neighbors, friends, colleagues, and online social networks. And it speaks to a near reversal of the Age of Enlightenment. 300 years ago, science was championed as freedom from religious dogma. I even learned today that the university was non-religious at the start. That was a break from the religious dogma. That was to have free thinking. Science meant free thinking and being able to doubt and question. It was okay. Today, science, in the eyes of the public, has become the new dogma. To some, it feels inaccessible, didactic, impersonal, and stripped of the human emotions of daily life. I just want to end with a call for a more humane science, embracing, not alienating, human emotions, values, and realities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for that interesting, thought-provoking and inspiring address to the event this evening. I'd like to now call on Professor Linda Bauld, OBE, as our giver of thanks for tonight's ceremony. Linda.
Well, that was really inspiring. I really enjoyed listening to you, Heidi, and I learned several things from that. So I'm also delighted just to offer this vote of thanks to all of you who've attended this evening, but particularly to Heidi and to all of her team. I think Professor Larson is a visionary, and I think there's two things I really want to highlight that I find personally valuable about the work that she and her team have done. I think I mentioned at the beginning the contribution to global health, and as we look ahead through this pandemic, we're building more confidence about the path out of this in the UK and globally, but the global context is really challenging. And the countries that I've done work in over the last few years, speaking to colleagues in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India, in Uganda, in Ghana, in the Gambia, and other places, the challenges around hesitancy there, but also just around the huge challenge in delivering vaccines and achieving vaccine equity is a really serious potential global crisis, actually, over the next little while. I know that Professor Larson and the broader team are making a huge contribution in those countries, and that, I think, for all of us here, as we look ahead, is very important. The second thing I want to thank her for is just the interdisciplinarity of her work. You know, at the beginning of this pandemic, I'm a social scientist, a behavioral scientist. I think we thought this was for the virologists and the epidemiologists, and we didn't really have a role to play. But I think one of the positive things to emerge from this, aside from the scientific advances we've seen and the acceleration of science and medicine, has been the interdisciplinary research that's been done around this crisis and the place for scientists from multiple disciplines to have a voice, social anthropology, social scientists, along with our other colleagues. So thank you for that as well. But in terms of this event, I just want to also thank very much the Lord Provost for his welcoming us here and hosting us, also Professor Wall for his contributions, and particularly as well to the City of Edinburgh Council for recognising the outstanding scientific achievement and for instigating this prestigious award back in 1988. Also to Edinburgh Science and the Edinburgh Science Festival for delivering the event and for the Science Festival that's been taking place online and in person over the last little while. So please do join me then in a vote of thanks, and also just to echo Heidi's words about having kindness and a science that embraces listening and taking into account the views and opinions of people from all backgrounds. I think that's something we can all take away from us this evening. So thank you very much for attending.